On a stormy night in New York, with torrential rain pouring down, the neon lights from towering skyscrapers glimmered on the slick, wet pavement below. James stood motionless in his lavish penthouse, a glass of whiskey clutched in his hand, his eyes fixed on a wedding photograph. The woman in the frame, Anna, gazed back with crystalline eyes and a shy, delicate smile. She was now his wife, a union orchestrated by deception. James, a young millionaire who commanded a billion-dollar tech empire, never imagined he'd fall into the cunning trap of a ruthless business rival. Anna, a pure and innocent young woman, had been coerced into becoming a pawn in a sinister plot to steal his company's secrets. Yet, unbeknownst to anyone, a fierce and forbidden flame of love ignited between them, burning with an intensity neither could deny. Could they overcome the dark shadows of betrayal to find their way to the light? Join us to uncover this deeply emotional tale. Subscribe to our channel now so you don't miss the next episode, airing every Wednesday at 8 p.m. on YouTube. James stood amidst the towering skyscrapers of Silicon Valley, where the glow of computer screens and the stark precision of numbers shaped his entire world. At 35, he was the embodiment of success. A millionaire commanding a tech empire that dominated the industry, with billion-dollar contracts and razor-sharp strategies that made rivals tremble. Yet his heart, as cold as the humming rows of servers in his data centers, had never stirred for anything beyond ambition. Love, to him, was a vague, extravagant notion, with no place in a world driven by calculations and power. He lived in solitude, cloaked by the dazzling aura of fame. Each day a relentless chain of emotionless decisions, guided solely by logic and gain. One evening, beneath the twinkling chandeliers of a charity gala in San Francisco, James entered the ballroom, his black tuxedo hugging his frame, exuding an air of commanding authority. The crowd murmured, their eyes trailing him as always, but he glided past, indifferent. Then, amid the sea of opulence, he stopped. A young woman stood alone in a corner, her golden hair cascading in soft waves, her simple white dress clinging to a delicate figure. Anna, the name whispered by the host as he introduced her, seemed out of place in this lavish world. She bowed her head, her hands clasped tightly as if to hide her unease, her eyes flickering with a trace of panic when they met James's gaze. Her purity, like a dewdrop in a desert, made him momentarily forget the numbers and strategies that consumed his mind. For the first time, James felt an inexplicable curiosity, a yearning to step closer, to understand who this enigmatic girl was. Anna, in that fleeting moment, felt James's gaze like a sharp blade, piercing through the fragile shield she'd built to conceal her fear. At 23, she was a wildflower grown in the gritty alleys of poverty, where dreams were a luxury she could not afford. This glittering world, with its sparkling champagne flutes and artificial smiles, was a nightmare she'd been forced to enter. A shadowy tycoon, his voice low and his smile sinister, had turned her into a pawn in a cruel game. He threatened her family, especially her frail mother, who survived on the meager sums Anna sent home. Marry James, steal his company's secrets, or your mother won't see another day, he hissed in the darkness, each word a dagger plunged into her heart. Anna had no escape. She had to comply, though her soul trembled with guilt and dread. When James approached, offering her a dance, Anna felt the world grind to a halt. His hand, strong yet warm, took hers, drawing her into the whirl of lights and music. She looked up, meeting his eyes, not the coldness she'd braced for, but a spark of curiosity, almost tender. Her heart pounded, not just from the fear of being unmasked, but from a strange, nameless sensation. The warmth of his touch spread, seeping into the deepest corners of her soul, where she'd long locked away all hope. In that moment, as they glided across the dance floor, Anna nearly forgot the conspiracy, the tycoon, and his menacing threats. She longed to believe, if only for a second, that she wasn't a traitor, that she could be an ordinary girl, seen by a man like James. But reality swiftly yanked her back. As the dance ended, James bowed slightly, offering a rare smile that left her breathless. He didn't know that this moment marked the first step in a dangerous game, where both were victims of deception. Anna turned away, her hands trembling, fighting to hold back the tears threatening to spill. She knew she couldn't let emotions overtake her. Her mission was to get close to James, win his trust, and steal the secrets that could shatter his empire. Yet deep within, she sensed a terrifying truth. She didn't just fear failure, she feared she wouldn't be able to resist the pull of this man. James, unknowingly, felt a subtle shift in his heart. The girl with the trembling eyes had planted a seed of emotion, something he'd long rejected. Neither realized they were stepping into a journey where love and betrayal would intertwine, testing the very limits of their hearts. A gentle drizzle fell outside the grand windows of the ancient Manhattan Cathedral, where the flickering light of candles danced across rows of polished wooden pews. Just 3 months after that fateful gala, James and Anna stood before the priest, enveloped in a lavish wedding ceremony overflowing with white roses and shimmering tinsel. James, clad in a sharp black tuxedo, stood tall, his face as cold and composed as ever, though a faint flicker of unease glinted in his eyes. He didn't love Anna. He reminded himself of this daily. To him, this marriage was merely a move in the vast chess game of power and prestige. The board of directors had pressed him, demanding a flawless family image to bolster shareholder confidence. Anna, with her innocent demeanor and shy grace, seemed the perfect choice for the role. James had agreed, viewing her as a piece of his strategy, a carefully calculated transaction, nothing more, nothing less. But when the cathedral doors swung open and Anna stepped forward, something within him wavered. Anna, in a pristine white wedding gown that clung to her slender frame, moved slowly down the red-carpeted aisle. Each step carried an invisible weight, her hands clasped tightly at her chest to mask their trembling. The delicate veil could not conceal her eyes, deep, glistening, yet filled with an inexpressible sorrow. She looked at James, not with the joy of a bride, but with a haunting blend of fear and yearning. In that moment, James felt his heart, long accustomed to indifference, stir faintly. Anna's image, like an angel lost between light and shadow, sparked an urge within him to step forward, to touch her, and banish the sadness that clung to her. But he swiftly dismissed the feeling, convincing himself it was an illusion, a fleeting weakness unworthy of his calculated world. The crowd erupted in applause. The organ's notes swelled, but Anna felt as though the world had narrowed to the pounding of her own heart. She stood there, before James, before the priest, before vows she knew she had no right to speak. The secret she carried, a coerced plot to steal James's company secrets, felt like a blade pressed against her throat. Every glance from James, whether cold or tender, made her feel small, guilty. She wanted to scream, to flee, but the image of her frail, dependent mother flashed in her mind, anchoring her in place. She had to continue this charade, though each vow she uttered carved a deeper wound into her soul. As the ceremony concluded, camera flashes from the press blazed relentlessly, capturing the moment James took Anna's hand, leading her out of the cathedral. His smile for the public was flawless, but Anna sensed the distance in his grip. She bowed her head, struggling to hide the tears welling in her eyes, her heart heavy with the truth that she was not only deceiving James but also betraying herself. For though she dared not admit it, her heart had begun to stir in the presence of this man she both feared and longed for. That wedding night, in the opulent bedroom of a penthouse overlooking New York's skyline, Anna sat huddled on the edge of the bed, her arms wrapped tightly around her shoulders as if to shield herself from the world. The dim light cast shadows on her face, highlighting the silent tears that streamed down her cheeks. Clad in a white silk nightgown, her fragility only deepened her sense of vulnerability. James entered, his tuxedo replaced by a white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, exuding a rare air of ease. He intended to keep his distance, to let the night pass as part of their transaction. but seeing Anna trembling stirred something unfamiliar within him. He wanted to hold her, to soothe the fear he couldn't comprehend. Stepping closer, he sat beside her, his deep voice breaking the silence with a warmth that startled her. "You don't have to be afraid." But Anna turned away, her tears falling faster, as if his gentle words only deepened her pain. Within Anna, a storm of emotions raged. She longed to confess everything, to admit she was part of a scheme that could destroy him. But the fear of consequences, not just for herself but for her family, locked the words in her throat. She feared James, dreaded the moment his gaze might turn to contempt if he learned the truth. Yet, above all, she feared herself, terrified of the genuine emotions creeping into her heart. Each time James looked at her, each time his voice carried even a hint of care, she felt herself sinking deeper into a love that had no right to exist. She turned her back, desperate to hide her tears, but her heart could not conceal the truth. She was falling for the man she'd been sent to betray. James, sitting there, watching Anna's trembling silhouette, felt a rare sense of helplessness. He was unaccustomed to offering comfort, unfamiliar with confronting emotions. Yet something about Anna, her fragility, her wordless sorrow, made it impossible for him to remain detached. He reached out, intending to touch her shoulder, but stopped, his hand hovering in the air. Rising, he left the room, leaving Anna to her solitude and her secrets. In his heart, a seed of emotion had been planted, though he wasn't ready to acknowledge it. That wedding night, both were trapped on the precipice between truth and deception, unaware that fate was drawing them closer, only to test them with the tempests yet to come. The neon lights of New York's skyline filtered through the expansive glass walls of the penthouse, yet their glow could not pierce the darkness that shrouded the lives of James and Anna. In the weeks following their wedding, the air between them grew stifling, as if an invisible cord tightened around their hearts. James, accustomed to absolute control in his high-stakes tech world, began to notice cracks in the foundation of his empire. Critical documents, secret projects, and pivotal strategies that shaped his company's future were leaking, slipping into the hands of rivals at an alarming pace. Each security team report struck like a dagger to his trust, forcing him to scrutinize everyone around him with a wary gaze. Even Anna, his newlywed wife with her fragile appearance, could not escape the spiraling vortex of suspicion swelling within him. James sat in his home office, the laptop's cold blue light casting a rare tension across his face. He scoured lines of code, sifted through emails, desperate to uncover the source of the betrayal. But the deeper he delved, the more powerless he felt, as if the enemy lurked right before him, within the walls of this very home. One evening, as the sunset bathed the room in crimson hues, Anna entered, carrying a cup of coffee, a quiet ritual she performed to ease his grueling work hours. But when her fingers brushed the laptop, grazing the keyboard, James's head snapped up, his eyes sharp as a blade. "What are you doing?" His voice was low, laced with restrained fury. Anna flinched, the coffee cup nearly slipping from her grasp, her eyes flashing with panic. She stammered, trying to explain she only meant to close the screen to urge him to rest, but the tremor in her voice and her averted gaze only fueled James's doubts. He rose, stepping closer, the space between them thick with tension. Anna retreated, her heart pounding, guilt and fear choking her, though she had never sent a single piece of information to the enemy. From that moment, James changed. He grew more guarded, his eyes tracking Anna even in moments that seemed peaceful. He quietly installed surveillance software on her phone, every message and call logged, as if he were grasping for proof to confirm the suspicions gnawing at his mind. Yet each time he saw Anna sitting silently in a corner of the room, her eyes red and her shoulders trembling, a sharp pain pierced his heart. He wondered if he was wrong, if the delicate girl before him could truly be the traitor he feared. The conflict within him grew, his logic urged vigilance, But his heart, though he fought to deny it, yearned to trust her. In the long nights, as Anna drifted into sleep, James stood by the window, gazing at the city's dazzling lights, feeling trapped in the very web of doubt he had spun. Anna, confined in the gilded cage of the penthouse, felt like a bird with clipped wings, bound by fear and guilt. Each cold glance from James sliced into her heart, making her feel smaller, more distant from her true self. She longed to fall to her knees, to confess everything, that she was coerced, that she never meant to harm him. But the image of her frail, dependent mother loomed like a cruel reminder that she had no choice. The terror of what the mastermind might do to her family sealed her lips, forcing her to endure this agonizing charade. She bore it in silence, each suspicious look from James a fresh wound. But what frightened her most was the truth blossoming within her. She was falling in love with him. That love, fierce and forbidden, was a flame with no right to burn, yet she could not extinguish it. In her solitary moments, Anna turned to the pages of a diary, pouring out the thoughts she dared not speak. Under the dim glow of a lamp, she wrote of her pain, the torment of being torn between love and guilt, her desperate wish for forgiveness. The trembling words, sometimes blurred by tears, were confessions she could only entrust to herself. She hid them at the bottom of her suitcase, in a secret compartment, as if concealing the shattered fragments of her soul. Each night, when James returned with his distant gaze, Anna clutched the diary, feeling herself sinking deeper into darkness. She didn't know that, despite his suspicions, James was wrestling with himself, torn between the betrayal he dreaded and the truth his heart craved. Both, in the opulent yet frigid penthouse, were ensnared in a silent whirlpool of doubt and unspoken emotions. James, with his razor-sharp intellect, sought answers through lines of code and surveillance, but his heart quivered each time he saw Anna's tears. Anna, her heart brimming with love and guilt, yearned for liberation but was bound by fear. They lived side by side, close yet impossibly far, unaware that the shadow of truth was drawing nearer, poised to ignite everything they struggled to conceal. In that silence, love and suspicion intertwined, forming a fragile thread, capable of binding them together or tearing their hearts apart. The New York sky darkened, heavy clouds pressing down on the city in a moonless night, casting an oppressive gloom. Inside the opulent penthouse, dim lights glowed against the glass walls, reflecting the silhouette of James, who sat motionless before his laptop screen. His eyes, usually sharp and cold, now betrayed a raw, unguarded pain. He had just uncovered an anonymous email, sent from Anna's own phone, containing detailed information about a top-secret project, a strategy that could shape the future of his tech empire. Each word on the screen sliced like a dagger, cutting deep into the fragile trust he had struggled to build for the woman he called his wife. His hands clenched tightly, his breathing heavy, as if the world itself were crumbling beneath his feet. Anna, unaware of the storm brewing, stepped into the room with a towel, gently drying her damp hair after a shower. She froze when she saw James, his gaze like ice, freezing everything around him. The tension in the air was palpable, an invisible cord tightening around her chest. Before she could speak, James rose, stepping closer, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and anguish. "You're a spy, aren't you?" The words, sharp as a sword, pierced straight into Anna's heart. She stood rooted, her eyes wide, tears welling up. Her body shook, her legs giving way, and she collapsed to the floor, her head bowed like a condemned soul awaiting judgment. She could no longer hide. The fear, the guilt, and the crushing pressure of months past surged like a tidal wave, sweeping away every shield she had built to protect herself. Beneath the faint glow of the lights, Anna began to speak, her voice choked and halting, as if each word were a shard of her shattered soul. She confessed to the conspiracy, to the shadowy tycoon who had threatened her family, to the sleepless nights torn between fear and conscience. She spoke of her mother, a frail woman surviving on the meager sums Anna sent home, and of the chilling threat that if she didn't comply, her mother would pay the price. Each sentence was a plea for forgiveness, But Anna dared not lift her eyes, dared not meet James's gaze. She braced for punishment, expecting him to turn away, to cast her out of his life as a traitor unworthy of mercy. But James stood there, silent, his face a canvas of chaos. Within him, a storm of emotions roared. The sting of betrayal stabbed deep. Yet Anna's tear-filled, earnest eyes flickered like a small flame, making it impossible for him to turn away. Time seemed to stand still. James looked at Anna, the small figure kneeling on the floor, her shoulders trembling, her wet blonde hair clinging to her cheeks. He wanted to shout, to demand answers, to unleash the burning anger in his chest. But something in her fragility, in the quivering voice recounting her pain, silenced him. His heart, though wounded, sensed the truth in those tears. He stepped forward, slowly, each movement a battle against himself. Instead of pushing her away, he knelt, pulling her into his arms. He said nothing, only held her tightly, his strong hands gripping her trembling frame, as if to banish the darkness enveloping them both. His warmth spread, seeping into her soul, where fear and guilt had held her captive for too long. Anna, for the first time in months, felt a fragile spark of hope, faint but enough to cling to. She buried her face in his chest, her tears soaking his shirt, her heart flooded with gratitude and pain intertwined. But that spark of hope was as delicate as a candle in the wind. Anna knew the mastermind behind the plot, the tycoon with his sinister smile, would not relent. He had made her a pawn, and now, with her confession to James, he would grow even more dangerous. She trembled in James's embrace, not from cold, but from dread of what lay ahead. And she was right. Just days later, as dawn's first light crept in, a group of strangers breached the penthouse. They took nothing, leaving only a scrap of paper on the table, its scrawled words a warning from hell. "Pay the price, or both will die." When Anna saw the note, her blood ran cold. She clutched James's hand, her panicked eyes searching for solace in his gaze. James, still reeling from the newly unveiled truth, gripped her hand tightly, as if to vow he would not let her face the darkness alone. The penthouse, now steeped in tension, pulsed with the sense of looming danger. James, with his keen intellect, began plotting their next moves, but his heart, for the first time, was not solely fixed on his company or prestige, but on the trembling woman beside him. Anna, carrying both love and guilt, felt she was no longer alone. Yet deep down, both knew the shadow of the conspiracy still lurked, ready to devour them if they weren't strong enough to confront it. In that embrace, on the fragile line between forgiveness and peril, they found each other, if only fleetingly, before the true storm descended. A thin morning mist cloaked New York, the feeble sunlight filtering through towering skyscrapers, yet it could not dispel the heavy tension enveloping James and Anna's penthouse. After that fateful night, when the truth of the conspiracy was laid bare, James was no longer the man defined solely by numbers and strategies. His heart, once as cold as the humming servers in his data centers, now blazed with a new fire, not just to safeguard the tech empire he had built, but to shield Anna, the woman who had slipped into his soul. He realized that, despite the pain of her betrayal, his love for her had grown into a force stronger than any doubt. Determination burned fiercely in his eyes. James sprang into action without hesitation, like a warrior preparing for the final battle. James sat in his home office, the computer screen's light casting a stark, resolute glow across his face. He hired an elite security team, former intelligence operatives, to trace the source of the threat. Every clue, every line of code, was meticulously analyzed, leading him to a familiar name. Victor, a former business rival he had defeated in a billion-dollar deal years ago. Victor didn't just want to seize James's company. He sought to ruin his life, reducing everything he cherished to ashes. This revelation, far from daunting James, only fanned the flames within him. With his razor-sharp intellect and strategist's instinct, he devised a counterattack. He chose to deploy a decoy, a meticulously crafted fake project filled with misleading information, tantalizing enough to lure Victor into a trap. Each move was a carefully calculated step, but for the first time, his heart wasn't solely set on victory. It was fixed on the woman standing beside him on this perilous edge. Anna, in the bedroom that was no longer a gilded cage, sensed the shift in the air. Fear still clung to her, a shadow that never fully retreated, but her love for James had become a guiding light. She was no longer the frail girl trembling under his suspicious gaze. The truth had been revealed, and though she had once been a pawn in the conspiracy, she knew she had to act to atone, to prove her heart belonged wholly to him. In quiet moments, while James was consumed with his plans, Anna secretly contacted an old friend, a brilliant hacker who had aided her in darker days. She sent brief messages, her voice quivering during phone exchanges, urging him to dig into Victor's systems, searching for evidence of illegal dealings and threats. Each time she hit send, her heart raced, as if she were walking a fragile tightrope between life and death. But the memory of James, his tender gaze in the night he held her, gave her the strength to press on. Every step Anna took was a confrontation with fear. She knew Victor, with his cunning and power, would not hesitate to crush anyone in his path. Yet she also knew that if she didn't act, she would forever dwell in the shadow of her guilt. She sat in a corner of the room, under the faint glow of a lamp, reviewing each email from her hacker friend, each line of code, each leaked document. Her hands trembled, not just from the chill, but from the awareness that every piece of information she gathered could be the key to saving James, to saving herself. She was no longer the naive girl coerced into being a pawn. Love had transformed her into a warrior, though her heart still beat with anxious rhythms. She wanted to prove, not just to James but to herself, that she was worthy of the forgiveness he had offered. Meanwhile, James, though immersed in his strategy, couldn't stop thinking about Anna. He watched her from afar as she sat quietly with her laptop, her eyes focused yet tinged with strain. He knew she was taking risks, knew she was trying to mend mistakes she hadn't chosen to make. Her quiet courage stirred his heart. He had once believed love was a luxury he couldn't afford, but Anna had changed everything. Each night, as she drifted into sleep, James stood by the window, gazing at the city's radiant lights, his heart brimming with resolve. He didn't just want to defeat Victor. He wanted to protect her, to give her a future free from darkness. Both, in the penthouse's silence, bore heavy burdens. James, with his bold plan and a security team poised for action, prepared for the final confrontation. Anna, with her codes and secret documents, quietly built a shield for the man she loved. They spoke little, but the glances they exchanged in fleeting moments carried a newfound trust, a bond forged through pain and forgiveness. Though danger loomed, though Victor remained a lurking specter, they knew they were no longer alone. Their love, born on the edge of betrayal, had become their mightiest weapon, guiding them through the shadows toward a fragile but hopeful light. Beneath the leaden gray sky of New York's outskirts, an abandoned warehouse stood solitary amid a field of wild grass, its rusted walls bearing witness to forgotten time. A cold wind swept through, carrying the scent of metal and damp earth, mingling with an air of suffocating tension. James and Anna stepped inside, their gazes sharp yet unable to mask the undercurrent of anxiety. This was the place they had chosen to confront Victor, the mastermind who had ensnared them both in a merciless game. James, his heart now beating not just for his company, but for the woman at his side, gripped Anna's hand tightly, as if to channel his strength into her. Anna, though her slender shoulders trembled faintly, stood tall, her eyes gleaming with a resolve forged by love and a need for redemption. They knew this moment would decide everything, not only their survival, but the future they could share. Inside the warehouse, light from broken windows spilled onto the stained concrete floor, casting patches of shadow and illumination in a stark dance. Victor stood there, his towering figure clad in a black suit, his sinister smile sharp as a blade. In his hand, a gun pointed directly at Anna, its steel barrel glinting in the dim light. He demanded James hand over the source code for the billion-dollar project. The key, he believed, to dismantling James's empire. James, with his keen intellect, knew the code was a decoy, a meticulously crafted part of the counterstrike he had planned. Yet when he saw Anna, her eyes glistening with fear, her body trembling under the gun's threat, his heart constricted. Though the project was fake, a piercing pain surged within him, as if her life was the only thing that truly mattered. He stood frozen, his gaze locked on Victor, struggling to maintain composure, but each heartbeat reminded him he could not lose her. Anna, in that moment, felt death lurking close. Victor's gun was a silent verdict, but instead of yielding, she sensed a fire igniting within her. Her love for James, her remorse for the role she'd been forced to play, and her desperate need to atone transformed her fear into strength. She glanced at James, his eyes filled with worry yet brimming with trust, and she knew she could not stand idle. In a fleeting, life-or-death instant, as Victor's attention wavered, Anna lunged forward. Her fragile frame moved like a gust of wind, shoving Victor with a force that threw him off balance. The gun flew from his hand, skidding across the concrete with a piercing clatter. James, seizing the moment, charged forward, using every ounce of his strength to pin Victor to the floor. But in that chaotic second, Victor, driven by the madness of a cornered man, managed to pull the trigger. A deafening shot tore through the quiet, shattering the stillness. The bullet grazed Anna's shoulder, crimson blood soaking her white shirt, spreading like a deadly flower. James's scream echoed through the warehouse, raw with agony and desperation, as if his entire world were collapsing. He released Victor, rushing to Anna's side, dropping to his knees to cradle her. His eyes, red with unshed tears, revealed a vulnerability he had always concealed. Her blood stained his hands, warm and searing, a cruel reminder of what he had nearly lost. Anna, despite the pain, reached for his hand, her weak fingers clinging tightly, as if anchoring herself to life. She looked at him, her eyes shimmering yet overflowing with love, and whispered, her voice faint, "I'm sorry, and I love you." Those words, though soft, pierced the darkness like a beacon, touching the deepest recesses of James's heart. He leaned down, kissing her forehead, silent tears falling. The first time in his life, he let emotion guide him. In that moment, he knew that even if the world crumbled, even if his empire vanished, he could not live without her. The distant wail of ambulance sirens and the security team broke the warehouse's silence. Victor, now bound, his eyes still flashing with hatred, was powerless to resist. The security team swiftly subdued him, dragging him from the scene, leaving James and Anna locked in their embrace. On the ambulance, Anna lay on a stretcher, her breathing shallow, but her eyes never left James. He held her hand tightly, his heart swelling with gratitude that she was alive, yet heavy with worry for the days ahead. The blood on her shoulder was temporarily bandaged, but the wound, though physical, symbolized the trials they had endured together. Anna, exhausted, felt the warmth of James's hand, and for the first time, she believed they could face any darkness as long as they had each other. In the cramped confines of the ambulance, amid the blaring sirens and flashing lights, James and Anna found a fragile peace. He looked at her, his gaze no longer cold or distrustful, but filled with love and commitment. She returned the look, though only with a weak squeeze of his hand, enough to say she would never leave him. In that moment, on the edge of life and death, they found each other. Not merely as two people bound by fate, but as two souls who had chosen one another, despite all the pain and betrayal. The abandoned warehouse, with its bloodstains and memories, stood as proof of love's power, a flame nothing could extinguish. Early autumn sunlight filtered through the golden canopy of trees in New York's outskirts, bathing the small wooden house in a soft, gentle glow, as if nature itself sought to soothe the scars of the past. Time, with its patient grace, had brought Anna back from the brink of agony. The scar on her shoulder, where a bullet had once grazed her, was now a faint line, yet it remained an eternal testament to what she and James had endured together. In the hospital room during those early days, when Anna's eyes were clouded with pain and medication, James was always there, holding her hand tightly, his gaze no longer cold but brimming with unwavering commitment. He had chosen her, not as a piece of a transaction, but as an indispensable part of his heart. Now, as she walked across the lawn in front of their home, her step steadier, the smile on her lips radiated life, like a wildflower blooming vibrantly after a storm. James, in the weeks following the confrontation with Victor, stood before the board of directors in the company's lavish meeting room. Light streamed through the large windows, illuminating his face, not with the icy detachment of a millionaire obsessed with strategy, but with the steadfast resolve of a man who had discovered a deeper meaning in life. He laid bare the truth, about the conspiracy, about Anna's unwilling role, and about the losses the company had suffered. His voice was calm yet resonant, each word carrying the weight of unflinching honesty. He refused to prosecute Anna, despite the skeptical glances from shareholders. Instead, he used his personal wealth to protect her family, ensuring that Anna's frail mother would never again live in fear. This decision was more than forgiveness. It was a declaration that he valued her above all fame and power. His company, though battered by the leaked documents, stood firm, thanks to his brilliant leadership and the unity of the team he had built. James, with his intellect and determination, had steered his empire through the tempest, but he knew the true victory was holding Anna's hand each day. They left behind the opulent penthouse in central New York, once a stage for doubt and pain, to start anew in a smaller home nestled along a quiet country lane. The house, with its rustic wooden walls and wide windows overlooking a meadow, lacked the grandeur of skyscrapers, but overflowed with laughter and warmth. Anna, no longer the girl imprisoned by fear, found joy in life's simple pleasures. She began writing a book, the blank pages becoming a canvas for her journey, from the shadows of conspiracy, the anguish of guilt, to the light of love and forgiveness. Each word she penned was a stroke of healing, not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever been lost. James, once immersed in a world of numbers and contracts, became her greatest admirer. He sat beside her on tranquil afternoons, quietly reading her drafts, his eyes shining with pride and love. He was no longer the cold millionaire, but a man who found happiness in nurturing the dreams of the woman he cherished. Each evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, James and Anna sat by the fireplace in their cozy living room, the crackling flames a soothing lullaby. They held hands, their fingers intertwined, needing no words to understand the emotions in each other's hearts. Beyond the window, a star-filled sky twinkled, like dreams they once thought were out of reach. James often gazed at Anna, his eyes tender, as if she were his entire world. He recalled the days of suspicion, the nights of pain, and realized that every trial had led them to this moment, a love pure and unburdened by transactions or calculations. Anna, in the serenity of their home, felt her heart lighter than ever. She was no longer the trembling girl, forced to play a pawn. She had found herself, and more than that, she had found James, the man who not only forgave her, but gave her a home to call her own. In the quiet moments by the fire, they shared small stories, simple dreams, and even the fears that had once held them captive. Anna spoke of the days she wrote in secret diaries, of the lines filled with pain and hope. James listened, his hand gently stroking her hair, his heart swelling with gratitude that she had been brave enough to stay, to fight for them. They no longer lived in the shadow of betrayal, but in the radiance of forgiveness. A journey they had walked together, step by step, heartbeat by heartbeat. Their small home, alive with laughter and warmth, became a symbol of the love they had built, not on extravagance, but on sincerity and trust. James and Anna, on the delicate line between pain and healing, had found each other. They made no grand promises, needed no ornate vows. A shared glance, a hand held by the fire, was enough to affirm they had overcome the darkness to reach a starlit sky, where their love, though born on the edge of betrayal, had become eternal. Each evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, James and Anna sat by the fireplace in their cozy living room, the crackling flames a soothing lullaby. They held hands, their fingers intertwined, needing no words to understand the emotions in each other's hearts. Beyond the window, a star-filled sky twinkled, like dreams they once thought were out of reach. James often gazed at Anna, his eyes tender, as if she were his entire world. He recalled the days of suspicion, the nights of pain, and realized that every trial had led them to this moment, a love pure and unburdened by transactions or calculations. Anna, in the serenity of their home, felt her heart lighter than ever. She was no longer the trembling girl, forced to play a pawn. She had found herself, and more than that, she had found James, the man who not only forgave her, but gave her a home to call her own. In the quiet moments by the fire, they shared small stories, simple dreams, and even the fears that had once held them captive. Anna spoke of the days she wrote in secret diaries, of the lines filled with pain and hope. James listened, his hand gently stroking her hair, his heart swelling with gratitude that she had been brave enough to stay, to fight for them. They no longer lived in the shadow of betrayal, but in the radiance of forgiveness. A journey they had walked together, step by step, heartbeat by heartbeat. Their small home, alive with laughter and warmth, became a symbol of the love they had built, not on extravagance, but on sincerity and trust. James and Anna, on the delicate line between pain and healing, had found each other. They made no grand promises, needed no ornate vows. A shared glance, a hand held by the fire, was enough to affirm they had overcome the darkness to reach a starlit sky, where their love, though born on the edge of betrayal, had become eternal.